Hi, I'm Osprix, and this is the Warpath Spellslinger, a versatile tank utilizing triggered spells for damage and max block and health on block for survivability. Before we get into the build itself, here's a quick overview of some pros and cons. While leveling, we can mostly ignore our weapon and focus strictly on building resists and health, as Hammer Throw does not benefit from any weapon implicits. Block and health on block is our main source of defense in monoliths, and Paladin provides a ton of it. Also, Smite is one of the best sources of healing in the game. This is effectively a one-button build, so actual gameplay is extremely straightforward. Unfortunately, this build lacks crazy DPS, but is still enough to clear empowered monoliths. Because this build relies so heavily on block and burst healing, we are extremely susceptible to damage over time. Warpath is the only button you'll be pressing, though not the skill we're using for damage. It serves its purpose by triggering Smite each second and Divine Bolt on hit. It will also be providing us a hefty plus 20% to our block chance, and will ignite enemies on hit, causing Smite to deal more damage. Smite will be dealing the bulk of our damage via hits and detonations on kill. It doesn't excel in either clear or boss DPS, but will provide decent sustained damage and healing in every situation. This is why the build is as survivable as it is, and why I'm recommending this build for first-time hardcore players. Javelin is being used as our movement skill, as well as a secondary source of Smite triggers. It also provides healing in a large area around it. It will be our clutch during monolith bosses, as having it active will greatly increase Smite's DPS. Holy Aura will be providing us with some much needed health gained on block, and amazing clear with the help of Flame Burst. Global Fire Penetration will also help in the late game, as empowered monolith monsters tend to be pretty tanky. Sigils of Hope stands as our final source of block chance from skills, as well as providing some additional fire damage. Since we only need 20 points in Sentinel, we'll max out Juggernaut to set our baseline fire and void resistance to 24%, as this will lighten our burden on idols. Armorclad is necessary, as we will be in the faces of everything we fight. We only need 1 point in Stalwart, as the block chance from it doesn't scale, and all 5 points in Aegis of Renewal, as it will be our strongest source of healing while leveling, since we will be using a shield. Only 1 point in Forge Guard for Steel Aegis to get that +2 unscaling block chance. This can be removed later if you can cover the difference via your gloves, rings, or shield. In the Paladin tree, we want to get 1 point in Honor for, you guessed it, another +2 unscaling block chance. Then immediately max out Defiance. We remove points in this, as we can make up the difference on gear and idols. I also recommend doing the same with Abyssal Endurance and Void Knight. As you take points out of Defiance, put them into Conviction instead. Next, we grab Holy Symbol for more health on block, though on a cooldown. Then Divine Bolt, as we should be nearing when we swap to Warpath. Max out Shared Divinity to increase the amount of Divine Bolt you produce to 6. This does reduce the chance of casting Divine Bolt on hit from 20% to 10%, but Warpath hits so quickly it doesn't really matter. Next, we go for maxing out Sanctuary Guardian, then grabbing Shield Wall, only if this will allow you to hit 100% chance to block while using Warpath and with all sigils active. This is an amazing, reliable source of health on block and will be immediately noticeable. Reverence of Duality will be our biggest source of increased health and will really help us push into empowered monoliths, so max this out as soon as possible. Finally, Light of Raya for the fire damage and move speed, as Warpath cuts movement speed in half while channeling. While leveling, we're going to use Hammer Throw with Hammer Vortex, Catapult, and eventually maxing out Ballista. So for damage, we really only need to look for 2 Hybrid Throw damage cost rings, and those should last you all the way to your swap to Warpath. Swapping to Warpath happens after you obtain a -3 spell cost wand with some modifiers to increase your Smite and Divine Bolt damage. We go for a wand as it reduces Smite's cost to 0, allowing for infinite Warpath channeling. Now there is a minus spell cost affix for scepters, however we're only scaling spell damage on this build, so going for a wand that has this implicitly opens up a prefix for a pure spell damage affix, which will lead to higher combined DPS from your spells. Since this build's main defense is block and health on block, affixes that increase these are what you should be prioritizing. Look for hybrid block chance and effectiveness on both rings and your gloves, block chance, health gained on block, and reduced damage taken on block on your shield. For high HP, look for added and increased life helmets, chests, and belts, while covering your resistances on all other pieces of gear and idols where necessary. For damage, look for a wand with increased fire and spell damage for the highest output possible. If you can't find one with both of these, elemental damage instead is a good stopgap. And look for blind on hit as well until you can cap your crit avoidance. Finally, look for a good fire penetration amulet to really push the damage of your triggered spells. In terms of idols, if you can afford to without ruining your resistances, look for plus seconds to Sigils of Hope and plus % chance to shred armor on fire hit. Both of these can be found on the same huge Raya idol, so one with both would be best in slot. Armor shred is a great source of DPS as all of our damage comes from hits. Before attempting empowered monoliths, you want to make sure you have 100% resists to counter Mark for Death, the health on block blessing from the Black Sun monolith, as well as a health on block and reduced damage taken on block shield. If you're having trouble overcapping your poison resist, which is especially difficult to do on a sentinel, a Carapace shield provides a full 75% and is a fairly high block chance base to boot. Also, Holy Aura can provide an additional 20%, so you only need an idol to cover the last 5%. Transition away from these as you build up poison resistance on the rest of your gear. This build can transition into a stronger damage over time variant or a version that uses the Judicator for extreme clear, though those builds and how to transition to them may be covered in a later video. That about covers the entirety of the Warpath Spellslinger. Look for a link in the description to find a full written guide, and check out my Twitch or YouTube channel to catch me playing this build day one.